Have you ever found yourself in a moment where you're undecided if you need to pivot away from what you're doing, tweak a little bit of the things that you are creating, the content, the direction, your niche? Well, in this episode, I want to talk to you about changing things and pivoting. More specifically, I want to talk to you about why I decided to move on from my previous podcast, Focus and Bloom podcast, which was my first podcast, and what I learned along the way. I'm Yesenia, your host, and this is Creative Made, the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to create smarter, not harder, and build content that actually supports their business. Let's dive in. All right, so today I want to talk to you about one, why I ended Focus and Bloom podcast, two, the biggest lessons I learned from that experience, and number three, why is Creative Made different? So talking about why I ended Focus and Bloom. When I started Focus and Bloom, it was part of the whole rebranding of my business. I went from Yesenia Bocanera Photography to Focus and Bloom Studios, and that then led the way to create Focus and Bloom podcast. And it was part of the idea of switching things up in my business because I felt that my business was bigger than just photography, that I needed to do something bigger that was meant to do something different to be able to make an impact. And I no longer felt that photography was it for me, at least on that aspect. Photography is still my love, and I will continue to create images, but for me this time. And this way that leaves more room and space for me to help others with their content and create content that can help other entrepreneurs make an impact within their industry and their community. So with that in mind, why on earth did I decide to stop? It sounds like I wanted to continue, or sounds like I was enjoying it. And that's actually the truth. I really was enjoying creating content for the Focus and Bloom podcast. I grew a lot. I learned a lot along the way about creating content for the sake of putting something out there, but really about creating content that is connected to my business, because I am an entrepreneur. I run a business, a service-based business, and how that podcast was then going to potentially bring me some new clientele, bring sales, and help me grow an audience. While the podcast did manage to hit all those goals, it really was a struggle to create content in a way that I felt it was being successful based on what I determined that was success for this podcast. However, for the past 2-3 years at the time of recording this episode, I wasn't really seeing the traction that I really was hoping for with Focus and Bloom. And while I love the idea behind it, I realized that number one, the audience was not engaged as I hoped for. Two, that the topics I covered were probably broad or just completely different and didn't fully align with where I was headed, nor with the audience that I had already built. And third is that, most importantly, it felt like I was creating for creating and not just really creating with a strategy. Now, I started my business as a photographer, and I started creating content as a photographer, mostly creating behind the scenes series and sessions for my fashion shoots. So that's the type of audience that I started building. This is in 2014. So my YouTube channel specifically, because while my podcast started as an audio only podcast, pretty quickly on, I switched it to video, and I started adding all of that content on the same YouTube channel. So this is an important aspect of this episode. I started adding content related to marketing and business, so more logistics, more strategy, more mindset, to a channel that was dedicated practically to behind the scenes tutorials on photography. And maybe I had 1 or 2 videos about how to grow your Instagram account, maybe, and how to start a business. And that's about it. Everything else was behind the scenes content. Also, at the time, my content in that YouTube channel was primarily in English, but I also had some content in Spanish that I was dubbing from my English content. Now, I won't go into detail about creating bilingual content or multilingual content. If you really want to learn about that, I'm going to click a couple of reference episodes from Focus and Bloom podcast where I talk about picking the language for your podcast if you're debating whether or not you want to do your content in English, for example, or Spanish or French or any other language. So check out those episodes that I'm going to link in the description. But in doing so, I found that my business was also evolving. And the conversations that I wanted to have for my podcast, Focus and Bloom at the time, were very different than what I had originally planned for Focus and Bloom podcast. So instead of teaching photography tips and gear review and behind the scenes for a fashion shoot, I wanted now to talk about how entrepreneurs who maybe are starting out or have a little bit of experience can refine their content to actually support their business in a sustainable way. And doing so using podcasting or video marketing as part of their content strategy. So completely different than photography, camera gear, all that fun stuff to this other fun stuff. So very different. So that was my biggest mistake, is not aligning that content with the audience that I already started to build. And granted, starting a YouTube channel takes time. And at the time that I did this, I think my channel had around 700 subscribers. So yes, it's still considered a small channel, but still 700 subscribers was quite a bit. So it was hard to say bye-bye to 700 subscribers and start a new YouTube channel with a brand new concept and whatnot. So I figured, maybe this should be the better option, stick with my current YouTube channel. That probably was the mistake. Looking back, obviously I didn't know it at the time. So that was actually one of the lessons that I learned, is that I needed to be okay with realizing that content, that photography content was okay. Its time was met, and it was no longer serving a purpose for my business. And parting away from that was hard. So that's a lesson, not every podcast, not every YouTube channel for that matter, needs to last forever. It could serve a purpose for a limited time. Sometimes it might be hard to see it at the time, but in the long run, it may be the best option. Now, we hear a lot about consistency, but sometimes the best thing that you can do really is to stop and reevaluate. If something isn't working, it's okay to pivot and start fresh. Now, because I really was so tied to photography, that this really was a reflection of my own mindset about, well, I've been a photographer for so long, and now with the pandemic, everything started to shift. So my business was starting to not be about photography and be more about marketing and strategy. So it was a reflection of the new direction of my business, but I was also undecided as to what exactly this new direction was. Yeah, I was starting to talk about marketing and video marketing and strategy in that sense, but I wasn't fully 100% sure that was the road. So I tested different programs, different VIP days and services. I was able to book clients throughout that time. So it was great. And we were able to obtain some results. But again, it wasn't that I wasn't sure about the direction. And that was then being reflected in my content. And I felt that I needed to continue creating. I felt that pressure of I need to push something out. I need to publish something because I need to market my business. And well, yeah, I needed to push something out. I needed to create content, but I wasn't doing it strategically, which also wasn't sustainable. And that's one of the things that I really have learned over the past several years, is also to build content to create content in a way that is sustainable for my business. My podcast, my business will look very different than yours, and yours will look different than another person, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to find something that makes sense for my business and for me, so that it's not just authentic content, but sustainable and strategic. So the other thing is that your content should grow with you. Your business, your audience, and even your own personal interests evolve over time. So if your content no longer reflects your expertise or that direction, or serves that ideal audience, then that's a sign to rethink your approach. The other thing is that a clear strategy makes all the difference. It clicks. With Focus and Bloom, I was figuring out things as I went. And with Creative Maine, which is the new podcast, I feel that I'm more intentional. I have a lot more experience behind the microphone, creating content. And now this podcast comes with a much clearer vision and mission than when I started Focus and Bloom podcast. But here's the thing. You need to start. I wouldn't know this now had I not started. And that's very, very important. Don't be afraid of starting because you don't have everything figured out. Sometimes it looks messy, and it's okay. It's not going to be perfect. The camera might look weird. The lighting might look off. The microphone might be like facing in the wrong direction. And, that could be fixed and you'll learn along the way. But you won't know until you go through those steps and go through that process and that experience. And it wasn't that I really didn't give it a try with my content. Like even after I decided to really pivot and decided that now I was going to be focusing on podcast production and strategy, then I then started revisiting my offers, my services, my podcast management services, my VIP launch podcast services, and my coaching strategy services for podcasters, that I was still figuring out the content. I was switching. I knew that this was my new direction. So I started testing out different types of content for my podcast to see if it would click, if it would make sense. And oh my goodness, how can I say this? Like it had results, but it was growing at a very, 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 very slow pace. And that was frustrating because obviously, we know that things take time and all that, but when you're putting so much effort and you're not seeing the result, it could certainly be frustrating. And that's like 100% true. I can't it's just real. That's part of the journey. During this period, this is about maybe 2022, late 2022, 2023, I was still figuring out what I was going to do with the Focus and Bloom podcast. I tested doing mini series, different mini series that could be of interest of this new audience to see if there was a bridge between the audience that I had originally, which were photographers, and this new audience. So that was part of my pivoting strategy, was seeing where the two met. The two were entrepreneurs. I had entrepreneurs as audiences, but maybe that was the idea. That was the bridge, the connection, or the link that I could then build upon with my content. So I tried a mini series on mindful content creation. I'm also going to link it here if you're interested in checking that out. I looked at my analytics. I checked out my analytics for the past 30 days, the past 90 days, the past year to see if there was any trend, if there were any trends in my content that would point me towards a direction as far as what type of content were people more interested in and what episodes were bringing in more subscribers to my channel. And while that kind of worked, I saw a little bit of growth here and there. It wasn't significant. Now, let me do a quick pause here because I want to stress out the importance or the role that YouTube has played in my business. Throughout these several years since I started my YouTube channel, there has been one video that has continuously grown my channel, even if it's just trickling here and there. But it was a video tutorial that I did about how to connect your iPhone to a camera, a specific camera. That is the most viewed video in my YouTube channel, and that has brought more subscribers to my channel. But that has been happening throughout the year. So that's the importance of having content on YouTube and having video. Now, this podcast is originally set to be in audio format, and I'll tell you why in a bit, but the importance of having content on YouTube, whether it's just audio only, is so crucial because it's a search engine. And as a podcaster, as an entrepreneur, and as a podcaster, one of the biggest issues historically that podcasters have had is the discovery. So just last year, YouTube was named the #1 platform for podcast discovery. So whenever you're considering on pivoting your content, on prioritizing or reviewing what platforms you're going to be now sharing your content to, I strongly encourage you to consider YouTube as part of that strategy, whether you're creating content in audio or you're already creating video podcasts or you're creating YouTube videos in general. Consider that because there's a lot of longevity with having content on the platform. One of my first podcast strategy clients booked me because she saw a video that I had made several years prior on YouTube. So while I was doing other things and figuring out other strategies, that video was working for me and brought me a client, an ideal client. So these are things that are important to consider whenever you're thinking about pivoting your content, pivoting your strategy, and deciding what platforms you're going to prioritize in this new phase, in this new strategy that you're working on. So why Creative Made is different than Focus and Bloom? Why would I launch Creative Made instead of continuing to change or tweak Focus and Bloom or start a new channel for Focus and Bloom? Well, in general, the shift, the change in the content was not small. And I tried it, I tested it, and this is really a bigger refocus, and it's more aligned with what I'm doing right now. And I feel that after all the tests that I did, all the trial and error, this is the better direction, the better decision for my content at the moment. Now, Creative Made is designed for entrepreneurs who've been already doing business for a few years, maybe a year or over that. Not necessarily beginners, although obviously beginners are more than welcome. But these are entrepreneurs who want content that is strategic and sustainable. It's going to be audio only and bi-weekly, making it a lot easier for me to produce and also for you to keep up with. But I'm not discarding the option of doing video in the future. I mean, this episode, I was originally going to do it in audio, and I figured, let me do it in video because I think this particular episode needs to also live in my other channel on Focus and Bloom, because it does talk about, next steps. Now, Creative Made is going to be focused on practical content strategy, not just a do more mindset, but actually making content work for you. The stopping, thinking, and then let's take action. I'm building a podcast that truly fits my business and my audience now. And in reality, I also really wanted to keep the other podcast going, to be very frank. But like I said, after all the tests that I made, I really wasn't finding the results, but also, very important, I was not finding joy in making it. And that was like, okay, I'm done. Like, yeah, I get it. Sometimes you have days that are great and super productive. And sometimes you have days that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm tired. I just want to just stop doing everything. But I was no longer finding joy consistently. And I figured, well, Yesenia, here we go. Hasta aquí, up to here. It's time to change gears and rethink this. Now, if you're new here, I've been creating content for several years now, as I mentioned, for Focus and Bloom podcast, but I also create content in Spanish because apparently one podcast is not enough. Having a second one in a different language is, why not? So yes, I have a second podcast. It's called Bloom Creativo, and it's a podcast dedicated to content strategy, video podcasting, content creations for entrepreneurs. It's really big, very beginner friendly, and it's been growing steadily over the past year. And I'm so happy because it's given me the opportunity to sort of connect with my culture, because it's in Spanish. I'm Puerto Rican, and that's my main language. That's my mother tongue, Spanish. So it's really been such a wonderful experience to start that from scratch and see it grow. And then also that was sort of that was another catalyst to me making the decision of, let's just pause Focus and Bloom when it hit 100 episodes, because it got into 100 episodes the same week that my business turned 10. So that was a really big and special milestone. But then I still wanted to create content in English because I enjoy creating content. Like, it really brings me joy. And that's one of the things that I really, that I really want you to think about when you're creating content. While yes, there might be weeks where everything sucks and it's like, oh my gosh, I really don't want to do anything else. But if it still brings you joy, then there's something there. There's the spark. And that's part of what I do when I talk to my clients in our strategy sessions, in our coaching, in our launch programs. I really want to make sure that whenever we sit down and we talk about your podcast strategy, we find a strategy, we build a strategy that works for your podcast, that brings you joy in doing so, that when you sit down and you're ready to record, you're like super pumped and excited. And yes, let's do this. We're doing it. Even if it's not perfect, but we're doing it because you really enjoy it. That's when I want to strive for when you work with me, when we work on our coaching sessions or in your podcast launch. So if you're listening or watching this episode and this has resonated with you and you're maybe thinking, well, maybe I need to rethink my content strategy too. I see you. You don't have to keep creating just for the sake of it. Your content can work for you. I mean, in fact, last year, my Spanish YouTube channel and for my podcast, Bloom Creativo, was helped me grow my gross income 26%. And it became the second largest lead conversions for my business. So remember, it's okay to pivot if you need to. And if you're feeling stuck or unsure of where to begin, I'm here to help. If today's episode resonated with you and you're ready to level up your content strategy, then let's chat. I'm offering content strategy sessions for podcasters and entrepreneurs who are ready to create a strategy that is not just authentic, but also strategic and sustainable. So click the link in the description of this episode so that you can contact me and we can book your discovery call. You'll learn more about my different strategy sessions and packages, or maybe you're ready to launch your podcast and you need guidance creating a strategy that makes sense for your business. Then let's go ahead and talk about my podcast launch services. I'll see you on the next episode of Creative Made.